Welcome back to the Ben Stewart Podcast. Now, picture this. It's 2011. We're in Los Angeles. You're at the Avalon Ballroom. It's a packed house for the Zeitgeist Media Festival. Peter Joseph put it on. Lily Hayden is performing. Sonic, my old band, is performing. Rutger Hauer is there, and a sharp comedian with a knack for satire on the state of the world and authority, Lee Camp. Shortly after that fateful night, my bassist, Mike Stang from Hierosonic, performs on stage during one of his comedy specials. Now, Lee has appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience. It's a podcast. You might have heard of it. He hosts Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp on Russia Today, and just had an interview with Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, which I really, really am excited to get into. So let's just hop right into it and get in there with Lee Camp on the Ben Stewart Podcast. All right, we are back. Lee, my man, how you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, those were beautiful times. I remember being blown away by Hierosonic. I love that. Oh yeah, and then I opened for you guys in New York once too. But yeah, those were beautiful times, coming together, creating art with a message. It was wonderful.
I know what happened to us, dude. We got all washed up.
I don't know if that's true.
Is it kids? So you just had a kid, man. This is your first, correct?
Yeah, first and only. I want to be clear on that.
Send the ground.
Yeah, man. Yes, sleep. It's a thing of the past. I think it's going to come in a pill here one of these days. So, dude, first thing I have to say, man, is I've been following you for quite some time, since we met all those years ago, and I've really appreciated where you've gone with all your work. And I really want to ask. I don't think I ever got into how you got into comedy, and was it something that you like? Were you into politics and social issues and things like that beforehand, and comedy was your outlet, or was comedy your outlet and then it just kind of took on those forms?
Yeah, definitely the second version there. It started as I just wanted to be a comedian. I was inspired by humor writers, and some of them I might even consider cheesy now. But Dave Barry and Seinfeld was a big influence, and I just loved making people laugh. I thought I could do it. I thought I could do the writing, and I started writing at like 12, writing humor. And there was really no, there might have been occasional opinion, but there was really no political slant on it. And Seinfeld, of course, is known best for being observational. And that term, it sounds kind of weird because all comedians observe things, but it really means having no larger agenda than making fun of something very relatively small. The example Seinfeld would use is I'll make fun of how a cotton ball, why is it there's so many cotton balls and no one seems to use them for anything. And it's just kind of meaningless, in a way, vapid, but funny vapid. I'm not denying the humor of it. But so I kind of started like that and kept doing comedy through college. And then immediately after college, moved to New York to become a comedian. I mean, really didn't even want to graduate college. I wanted to just go straight up and do comedy. Started out in New York. Well, I started out in Richmond, Virginia, but after college, went to New York City, getting on stage every night of the week. And it was a couple of years, about a year in, I started having a little bit of political commentary in there. The Iraq War really woke me up. I mean, seeing bombing on our television screens and just thinking to myself, what the fuck what do we have against the people in Iraq? Like and I know that sounds so ignorant, but I really was ignorant of the real world around me. It's kind of in that way, it's kind of a sheltered upbringing. You know, you grow up in Richmond, Virginia. You see the Confederate statues and that luckily have been mostly torn down recently, but you see all the Confederate statues. My high school growing up was the Confederate Rebels, was the mascot. And you just think this must be right. Like, you wouldn't be surrounded with this stuff if it were wrong. And you slowly, it takes a lot to kind of jar you out of that, I guess. But so I view my real education as happening after college. After I got out of a university and I started reading and I opened myself up to Chomsky and Zinn and Joseph Heller and, Chris Hedges and all these brilliant writers and thinkers. And it completely blew my worldview apart. In kind of a wonderful way. I was excited by it. I was like, holy shit, I know what's really going on now at a larger way. Then of course, Occupy also lit a fire under. By the time of Occupy 2011, I was already an activist. I was at the first night of Occupy, so obviously I was tapped into that stuff. But Occupy really lit a fire under it all, for me, but for many people. And it just kind of went from there. You know, I ended up with a TV show, one of the very few TV shows in the United States where I can truly say whatever I want, and I've never been censored. I've never been told what to say. It's really kind of unheard of on our mainstream airwaves. I mean, on our television airwaves. And the other thing is I write all my own content, which is also unheard of. I mean, there's a lot of great comedians, Jon Stewart, John Oliver, like these are funny fucking people, but they don't write all their own stuff. And I don't necessarily begrudge them that. If I had the money for a staff of writers, maybe I'd have one, but I write all my own stuff. So it is like an immense level of freedom.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And the dude, I just have to go back real quick to saying, like, when we were watching Operation Shock and Awe on TV, and I remember that time and feeling like, this is weird though. Isn't this war? Like, isn't this like damage, destruction? And like, from the perspective of like, what we're seeing, like this whole city, like, is this weird that I hear people cheering? Like, I constantly hear people cheering about this, and I get it. I totally get it. But I mean, to me, I was also just in, well, I guess shock and awe would have been the first Gulf War back in the early 90s.
No, I don't think they call it. I thought they didn't call it shock and awe till the second one, 2003. But
no, you're right. I just remember watching that, and that was when I had just gotten into the military. And at that time, I wasn't really like huge into, being patriotic or anything like that. I went into the military just because I was afraid of following a music career, actually. And so I went into the military and instantly was traveling around the world thinking like, for the first time ever, met my first real racist, several of them. And I just remember being like, this is who I'm surrounded by. Like, this is who we got. These are our brave soldiers. And there was some camaraderie, but I just remember it was then that started turning me into what I got into today, making films, talking about the state of the world. So, I mean, like, it kind of took around that time for me to start snapping out of like 6 years. So I enlisted at age 17 and got out at age 23, and they were waving $20,000 in front of my face, and they were like, compulsory pay raises and absolute security and $20,000. Have you ever seen $20,000? And I was like, No, but I think I'm gonna try my hand at the music industry. You know, like one of the more difficult industries to crack into, and that was important for me because like that was me actually taking a stand for something that I believed in. So I appreciate the fact that you saw or you even felt rising in you a need for you to speak about things that were a bit more pointed than just whatever the observationalist. I'm not sure what you were chatting about beforehand, but actually talking about stuff that really means something to you. And I love that. I mean, I'm not sure who even had this quote, but somebody who said, if you don't want the king to kill you, make him laugh. You know, so it's very interesting that you use comedy around some of the most like heinous shit that's going on in the world.
Yeah, who was it? So I think you're combining two great quotes. One of them is, if you're going to tell the people the truth, make them laugh or they'll kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
The other one is, only the jester can tell the king the truth. So
yeah,
both great quotes that both totally apply for right now. I mean, some of the rare moments where we've actually seen presidents have the truth spoken to their faces is the comedians on the press corps dinner,
yep.
which is why Donald Trump refused to do it when he was president.
Can't take the heat.
But yeah, I mean, thank you for giving me props for it. But it was just kind of like, I mean, when I had achieved a career in comedy for a moment where I was touring colleges, but I was not a name at all. I had essentially no television credits. My television credits were all, 1 second. He said one sentence as a bartender in a Gwyneth Paltrow film. Yeah, people don't come storming to the theaters to see that guy. So, it was like, I was a no name, but the activism side, which was kind of separate from my comedy in many ways, was growing in me. I was doing more activism, caring more about it. It felt like it was important. And then going up on stage every night and kind of not really inserting that side of me into the stand-up. But I started doing it slowly because, one, it was what I cared about, but two, there are so few genres of art left in this country. I'll just speak for this country, in America, where the person gets on stage and speaks unscripted to a crowd and can say whatever the flying fuck they want. They can be out of their goddamn minds or whatever, say anything. And people will come and sit and watch it. Like, there aren't monologuists anymore. There's very rarely poetry readings. Like, there's so little of that. And so I was like, I'm on a stage in front of people every night. I feel like at least some of that should be spent saying something that means something, like, long term.
Who do you think today, like, who do you see today that's doing it right in the comedy scene? Who would you say is inspiring you as far as like speaking up and saying what they really feel, but executing it well?
Well, I'll be honest. I don't view myself as that old, but I've become one of those old guys that is not keeping up on young comedians. So I have, and the pandemic has just furthered that. So I don't know a lot of really young guys, but, Chris Mohan is one that opens for me, and he does great political comedy. Obviously, I've got 3 great comedians on my show, Redacted Tonight, Jafar Khan, Naomi Karavani, Anders Lee, and then, longtime Redacted correspondent John F. O'Donnell does some wonderful political stuff. So, we've had some great correspondents on the show over the years, but I can't speak to what's going on in the underground rooms. Maybe there is more political and strong cultural commentary comedy going on. But when I was at those clubs every night of the week, there was very little of it. It was like, I was viewed as this weird thing. People were kind of annoyed that I was speaking politics. One comedian, despite the fact I was always doing fairly well, I wasn't willing to just go up and bomb. And in some ways that separates me from Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks had many a performance where he was like, you guys don't get me, and I don't give a shit, and you're just gonna hate me as a group, and we're doing it anyway. I generally always got laughs, but I inserted a lot of politics in it, or a lot of views in it, and some comedians were annoyed. I remember one veteran comic getting off the stairs like a 1 a.m. show, and I do all my stuff, about the ruling elite and the corporate America destroying our lives, and I did fine. I got laughs, and then I get done, and he goes, "Hey, Cam, what are you doing talking about politics? You say your dick jokes and you get off stage. It's 1 a.m."
Different generation. Different generation.
Yes.
But a lot
That's
of people,
all you're supposed to talk about at 1 a.m.
Dance monkey.
I know. And but a lot of comedians think they have some political comedy in their routine because they do 5 minutes of Trump jokes. But to me, that's not, like when I was starting out, everybody had their 5 minutes of Bush jokes. Yeah. It doesn't, to me, that doesn't count as true cultural commentary, Bill Hicks, George Carlin kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, and it's got to be fresh. It can't be too easy. Like, that's the one thing that I've wondered. I never got into, obviously I never ventured into comedy or stand-up. I know it's a really tough game. Obviously being alone up there on stage, and the one thing you really have to do is that thing that I guess there's a formula around it, making people laugh. But like, it's like, as you said, even legends like Bill Hicks, like you get up and then the audience is different than you expect. What you expect is going to catch on and it doesn't. And then the room has this whole feel to it. So I've always felt like when it comes to like spitting truth, like it has to be done in the right way. It can't just be, too on the nose. It can't be too easy for people. It's actually got to be well thought through. And so did you really like improv? I mean, like, I'm sure you had scripted jokes and stuff like that, but how much of that was improv?
Well, so as Carlin said, there's for a long time, I mean, there's been in stand-up, there's really been two kinds of comedians. There's been the writer comedians that, slave over most of the words that they're saying. And then there's the kind of riff it, go with what's coming out of your head kind of comedians, which, there's a lot that fit into that realm that were great, like Robin Williams. And so there are definitely those that are good at just spraying all kinds of shit out there and seeing what sticks. I'm definitely more in the Carlin vein of a writer comedian. There were always ad-libbed lines and, sentences here and there. I never just went with something completely word for word, but most of my bits were, written out and then thought about and, planned out fairly carefully. And then honed over, you in stand-up, you'd hone your bits over many shows. But over the past several years, because I've written 360 episodes of Redacted Tonight, and the opening, 10 minutes is essentially stand-up straight to camera about important topics. More of my stuff is at least not like heavily honed. Like I'm often doing a lot more sets when I get stage time. That's not the TV show. That is fairly new stuff, and I mean really new. Like performed in front of a crowd like once or twice. Whereas there was definitely a time in comedy, and I don't know how much it's changed in the with the young guys now, young guys and gals, but and the young gender fluids as well.
Yes.
I don't know how much it's changed now, but you were if you were a really good comedian, you were not doing jokes that hadn't been done, 50 times, often 100 times. Like you were honing that stuff within an inch of its life. And I think there's less of that now. I think people do. And it's also very different in the UK, where I toured a bunch, did the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where many young comics who have no name recognition at all are doing the Edinburgh Festival, where they do a new hour every August, or for the month of August. And that was not a thing in the U.S., still is not a thing in the U.S. There was no comics doing new hour every year. nowadays, because of with Redacted Tonight, I'm doing a new roughly 16 minutes every week. So it is a very different thing. But it's, you know, I don't think my comedy suffered at all from writing new stuff every week.
No, dude, I love it. It probably keeps you sharp in some ways, writing every single week, you know, because again, Redacted Tonight, it's beautiful comedy, but it's also very poignant what you're talking about. I really liked, now this would be a couple weeks old when you were talking about the Ukrainian president who was a president, you know, an actor, acted as the president on, I forget what, like it was a show or a movie or something like that. And then he showed a little skit of it and it was ridiculous. It ended with him like, you know, like, some semi-automatics shooting and shit like that.
Yeah.
But really, really good stuff though. And I mean, that's how long of writing a script does that take? Do you do it all in one day? Do you write the script and then film all in the same day?
No, and by the way, I'll just throw out there, that the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, was a comedian and a comedic actor. And basically, it seems won the election for Ukrainian president because he was the Ukrainian president in a comedy show, which I would like for
Idiocracy.
I would like for our electoral system to get more like that, where you could just be elected for playing the president in a comedy.
We're almost there.
I mean, yeah, Donald Trump's not far off, let's be honest. But
no, and Reagan was an actor. I mean, like he wasn't a good actor or a president, I don't think. But you know,
true, and we all know The Rock would be elected in an instant. So
totally.
But yeah, anyway. In terms of writing, I don't write it that day, but I write it over the span of the week, and we film on Thursdays. So really, I write it over 3 days: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I do all the writing and research for the words I'm speaking myself. The correspondents write their segments themselves. So all that research and any headlines and quotes and all that stuff. That's all my own research and all my own writing. And I try and have the script essentially done, except for maybe little tag jokes and ad libs and stuff. It's essentially done by Wednesday midday. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like two and a half days to write the bulk of or almost all of what I'm doing, what I'm performing on the show. And then I have a second show, which is the interview show with, you mentioned I had Roger Waters on last week.
Which I want to get into next. The last thing I want to say, because the editing is done real well on Redacted Tonight, do you have any hand, maybe not in the editing, but being able to see it before it's done, to see the final edit?
So it's almost all done live. And I don't mean live on TV, but as, they call it as live in the TV business. Right. We film it as it's going to look on the screen. So there's very little editing that goes into it. Sometimes if it's too long for TV, we cut it down for TV and then the full thing airs online. But essentially it's filmed as live, and up until the pandemic, we had a live audience. Of about, it was just a small one, 30, 40 people. And, that I had fought for the live audience and I loved it. It's definitely a different thing. It's a different beast to deal with a live audience and to film it that way. But which is kind of how we got into the habit of filming it as live. So we still do that because if you have a live audience, you can't do the same segment over and over. So, we still film it as live. So there's very little editing that goes on afterwards. Now, in terms of editing, like the images and stuff, I'll put in the script. I'll put in what I want the image to look like. So, take Mitch McConnell and put a donkey body on put his head on a donkey body or whatever the fuck.
Insert animal part.
insert turtle body to Mitch McConnell's head, and then there's a graphics department that creates the images. So there are definitely people working. Yoki Danoff is our producer and editor, but in terms of like editing after it's filmed, there's almost none.
Okay. Dude, so Roger Waters, like huge icon in my past and also all the way up to right now. Like, did you personally reach out to him? And I want to get into the content of what you were talking about there, because it's very real with what's going on right now. But like just landing Roger Waters as an interview, how did that come about?
Well, he's an amazing activist, and he's stood up for Palestinian rights for, 20, 30 years now. He's fighting tooth and nail to free Assange, to free Stephen Donziger. He's really great on like pretty much everything that I've seen him speak about. And the time I first met him was Randy Credico, a well-known political comedian who now does a lot of activism. He put together a show to benefit Assange, or Assange's legal defense. This is fairly recent, last October, I think. And, me, Cornel West, Roger Waters, Randy, Ted Alexandro, Jafar Khan, Katie Halper, and a few others, Margaret Kimberly, can't remember who else I'm missing, Margaret Kunstler. And so it was a mix of comedy, music, speaking, and we did it in New York, and it was really just a cool night. And so anyway, that was the first time I met and hung out with Roger Waters. And then, he's a great guy, and just he's hitting it out the park on so many important issues. So I asked him to come on the show.
So then you dove into Israel. What else did you guys get into?
So yeah, we talked about how it feels like the tide is turning on Palestinian rights and ending the apartheid state, which Amnesty International has recently finally come out with a large report where they literally detail the entirety of Israeli society and their systems, and say at every juncture it is equivalent to an apartheid state, a people being oppressed for simply being a different race or nationality, which is considered apartheid, and it's illegal under international law. And Amnesty International came out with this big report. So I asked Roger Waters, it feels like after all these years, the tide is turning. And he says, yeah, absolutely. The tide is turning. We know who's on the wrong side of history. These are big moments right now. Then we also, he talked about the insanity of the U.S. creating war in Ukraine right now. He talked about, we talked about Stephen Donziger, who, for those who don't know, environmental lawyer, won the largest ever victory against an oil company. Chevron was supposed to pay $9.5 billion for the damage and destruction they caused in the Amazon and Ecuador, killing over 1,000 indigenous people. And this was not an accident. They knew they were dumping this crude, toxic waste, and they told the indigenous it was fine, you could drink it. They told him there's no problem. So anyway, he wins this case in Ecuador. Chevron, in order to not pay the $9.5 billion, withdraws their entire operation from Ecuador. Then, but they're chased in other countries to pay that money. They've still not paid a dime. But what they've done instead is use the corrupt American justice system to go after Stephen Donziger, the lawyer who won. Yeah. And he is now under house arrest in Manhattan. He's been under house arrest at some of that time in prison for 2 years now, for winning a case against him. I mean, that is 100% what it is. He won a case against Chevron, and now they have him imprisoned. And then we also, of course, talked about Julian Assange and, this Kafkaesque banana fucking kangaroo court that he's been in for 10 years, persecuted, tortured, for simply the revealing the truth about war crimes that no one denies that everything WikiLeaks reported is true. Yeah. There is you can't find a soul who says any of it was wrong or fake. And yet he is imprisoned for 10 years and they haven't released him yet. And, I was talking to Chris Hedges the other day, and he said, they're doing exactly what they wanted to do, which is crush him. He's not in good health. He's had a stroke. He's had other illnesses. And this is what their goal was. The goal of the American empire was to crush the person who revealed how the sausage is made, how they know they're creating war crimes. They know the people they're killing around the world. The latest numbers are that 6 million have died from our wars on terror, quote unquote, over the past 20 years. We've killed 6 million innocent people, and here we are crushing one of the people who helped reveal these facts. So Roger Waters is doing a great job to use his platform, his celebrity, to raise these issues.
Yeah, they're clearly trying to make an example.
Man, I really, it is a really good example. And you were like, in that, I wanted to bring up something that some of your past few tweets. The U.S. creates wars and economic wars around the world every day. It's a never-ending attempt to control all peoples everywhere. Those who try to stand up against it are either sanctioned, attacked, or propagandized against. It's definitely that we're seeing. And what I would say with Assange is like making an example. It's not about being right. It's really about making an example of like what might happen to you if you stick your neck out. And then on top of this, we have an incredibly, this was your tweet 23 hours ago. We have an incredibly racist justice system in the U.S. If Black Americans were listed as a country, they would have the highest incarceration rate in the world at 1,500 per 100,000. The next highest country would be the U.S. with 698 per 100,000. And China has only 121 per 100,000, which is really interesting. And I just read something the other day that it was a statistic about small businesses being lost throughout the pandemic, primarily from the lockdowns. 50% of African-American owned small businesses closed permanently. And that's like, it's not the same for white owned businesses. And they, like really diving deep into this, like, how could this be, how could it have been so, I mean, if this is really just, what it seems like it is on the face of it, why was it so slanted towards African-American small business owners? So it's really interesting, and we're living in freaking weird times, and it seems like a lot of people who care about the same things are not able to get on the same page about quite a few things about what's happening in the world today. So I'm curious, like, your thoughts on just, I wouldn't say social media, but just like the way we now arrive at information, and like you and me, we both have jobs where we report on a lot. How do you have to go about vetting what it is that you're reading, to make sure that you're making, the best case that you possibly can in a world that it really seems like you can find contradictory information on any freaking topic you want?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with media literacy. It has to do with, learning which sources are reliable and are outside of the kind of corporate America controlled talking points. This is the type of thing where, like, it doesn't mean that every time the New York Times says something, it's false. But what it means is we now know how much the New York Times lies to us. I'm just using them as an example. Of course, you could say Fox News and all the other garbage out there, but we now know how much they lie to us. We know that they have manufactured consent for war. If you look at our war on Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, we know they manufacture consent for economic war against Venezuela, Cuba, Iran. You can just go down this epic list of how they will further propaganda against any country that the U.S. State Department says is our enemy or is we're trying to stop or whatever. And so once you know that, there's no reason to trust them on other issues, which is a real problem because you end up with a system where people don't know what to trust. But it comes down to media literacy. I have a large list of sources that I view as reliable and people that are journalists or citizen journalists that have proven to me again and again that they are not gonna just lie about what's happening out there. And and recently Eleanor Goldfield and I created a website called radindiemedia.com that is not meant to be a moneymaker at all. There's no ads or anything on it. It's just a site that grabs articles and videos from every reliable source that we can find, or as many as we can put up there. And it just, re-updates every day. So people can go to Rad Indie Media, or Rad like radical. Oh yeah, there it is there. radindiemedia.com. And they can not only find great articles and videos, but they can look at the sources that we're featuring there and, look into them, decide why we decided they're reliable and that kind of thing. But part of the reason I created that was exactly what you're saying, that people don't know what to trust. They don't know where to go for information anymore. And the other reason we created it was to try and have a go-to point, like a meetup point, really, for when these things are censored. I mean, my show and my Facebook page, et cetera, have been shadow banned for years now, heavily. My Facebook page, which I spent 10 years building up, has 330,000 followers, but they don't show the post to hardly anyone. And you aren't told, hey, you're shadow banned now. You just see the numbers and you see that they have stopped showing your post to everybody. And so as long as this is happening to everybody who's anti-war, everybody who's anti-corporate America, corporate desecration, environmental destruction, if all of that is suppressed, we have to have somewhere that people go that care about those things, that care about fighting for the oppressed, that care about fighting for the environment. And so we created that site, radindiemedia.com for that. But, these are fucked up times, and it's amazing to watch. It's amazing to watch people that supposedly are on the left tear each other apart over the past year or two because they have a disagreement on one issue. Sometimes it's, sometimes it's with me. They don't like the one thing I said, so now we're, he's a corporate shill and he's been bought off and all this stuff. And it's like, everybody I respect, I have some small disagreement with on something. Like there are amazing journalists who are also religious. I'm not religious. Does that mean I cancel them and I decide they should go, fuck themselves? No, I appreciate their work that isn't about religion. So it's like the idea that if you disagree with someone on one issue, now if you disagree with them on 10 issues and they say that, all black people should be rounded up and imprisoned, or all immigrants should be rounded up in prison. All right, well, that's a good reason to cut ties with them. But it's amazing. It's amazing to watch what remains of the little left wing in America just shred itself.
Well, even somebody as extreme as that, Lee, you look at somebody like Daryl Davis, who the movie Black Klansman was based off of. He de-radicalized a lot of KKK members, and I think that the same thing. Joe Rogan actually just had on a former Muslim radical who now is de-radicalizing people, and these kind of conversations are so important. Even with the most radical elements of society, there is a path to redemption. There is a way for people to realize how they were just sold a bag of BS, bottom line. And it is amazing to see how especially the left has become so quick to not even want to have a conversation, and so quick to and do you think that really started, it's a combination obviously of media, sensationalist media, and really just feeding into people's fear and anger, but do you think it really just broke once Trump got in office, and this idea of Trump derangement syndrome, people just lost any sense? Because I remember growing up, there would be disagreements, but there was still room for to be amicable, but it's gotten bizarrely bad as of late. How have you seen that? And especially as something I want to ask about with, something like Russiagate, how that broke a lot of people's brains, and being at a network like yourself where you have such freedom of speech, but at the same time, people are saying, oh no, you're just a stooge for Putin. When I remember finding RT in your show, because it was just one of the refreshing ones where I'm like, hey, this is actually semi-anti-establishment rhetoric, and yet they're getting smeared the hardest. And that became a big indicator of maybe I should look closer at these things they smear so quickly. But just speak that a little bit of just how that's imploded and where you see it now with everything in Canada, and just the future of media they're done, it looks like, and this is like a wounded animal.
I mean, there's so many points to make, but yes, there's definitely the Trump derangement syndrome thing. People thought, and the Democrats needed that. They needed to say that, because every 4 years they go, most important election ever, you have to view the other side as the end of the world and us as not the end of the world. Whereas I would never vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. They are both horrific racists who are CEOs of the most horrific war machine you've ever imagined. Like I said, 6 million dead over the past 20 years. And if you say, oh no, only Trump's the racist, Biden's not, Biden is by far responsible for imprisoning more black people in this country than Donald Trump had. Donald Trump was just more outwardly racist. Neither of them speak for the oppressed. Neither of them honestly want to help those who actually need help in this country. And so I have no interest in voting for either of them. But we're told, oh, no, it's just Donald Trump. You have to vote for the other side, most important election ever. Blah, 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 blah. And they have to do that every 4 years, every 2 years, really. Whereas, as I was describing on Redacted Tonight the other day, this was the most bought, every election is the most bought out election we've ever seen. This past one, $14.4 billion spent on the election. Two people, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson, spent $100 some million, which is more than the entirety of the United Kingdom or Germany or France spend on their elections. It is, and people point to the fact, oh, the person who spends the most money wins 80% of the time, and over 80% in the Senate and over 90% in the House. However, if you look at the two people that spend the most, meaning the two corporate shills, they win 100% of the time. Yeah. So this is a completely bought out system. And it's been amazing to watch people ignore all of that and decide, oh no, I can't listen to anything on Redacted Tonight because it's on RT, when in fact, like I said, I've never been told to say anything. These are all, I write my own stuff. I'm never censored at all. Whereas every other network, there's heavy censorship. You know, Melissa Harris Perry, a former host, once she was fired, went on Democracy Now! And said not only was she heavily censored, she was censored on things you wouldn't even think matter that much. Like she was going to do an episode on Beyonce's Super Bowl halftime show, and they wouldn't let her do it because Beyonce was wearing a Black Power inspired outfit. And it's like, that's the level of censorship you're talking about on other, that was MSNBC talking about on other networks. Whereas I've never been censored in any way. And people, I just want people to use your brains. Like, watch my show, and I don't present any of the other shows on RT. Like, if you find another show on RT and you think this guy's out of his goddamn mind, then fine. But look at my show and decide my show on its own credits and decide whether I'm speaking the truth. And almost everything I'm saying, I'm sourcing too. I'm showing quotes from articles, where it's coming from, etc. But it's just amazing, you know, but they needed to create this level of censorship and suppression. They needed to get most of America to shut your brain off to anything outside of CNN, because stuff was getting too opened up. It was, you know, RT became, back 2014 or so, became the #1 international news channel in America. And our corporate empire freaked the fuck out, because you can't have people learning the truth. I remember the first time I ever encountered an RT show, I saw an Abby Martin clip, and I was like, wait, you're allowed to say this on television?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, she just said the words American Empire. I didn't even know you were allowed to say that stuff. So, it blew my mind the first time I saw something on RT. And really all it is they are letting people actually speak their mind in a way that corporate America never would.
Yeah, and it comes out. It comes out in your stories.
When I'm watching your show on YouTube, at the very bottom, it has that bar and it says, Russia Today is in part funded by Russia. It's pretty interesting. It's the same kind of shit that they need to throw in there.
I want to see under every CNN, NPR, Fox News, I want to see it say partially funded by weapons contractors.
Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. Big Pharma. Totally. And I'm also really excited too, because I want to give just wanted to touch this real quickly, just so people know solutions, because there's a lot of solutions happening right now. One of the big ones I know you're involved with that I thought was exciting is what's happening with the People's Party and how this populist rhetoric is finding a more organized structure for people to find. Obviously, we talked about what's happening in Canada, but what do you just speak that a little bit of how do you feel about that and what kind of drew you to that movement?
Yeah, Nick Brana helped create that movement. He was one of the higher ups in the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. He came on my show, Redacted Tonight, so we became friendly. And he led a walkout. This was after Bernie, quote unquote, lost the election. There was heavy rigging of that in order to make sure he lost the election, such as super delegates and everything else. But after that happened, Bernie Sanders created Our Revolution, which was intended to be an activism and movement building resource, but they were going to take massive corporate donations. Well, guess what? Once any organization takes millions of dollars from a corporate or, a billionaire or whatever, they are heavily indebted to that person. Even if there's no written contract, you got to do what I say, they're just heavily indebted to them. And so he led a walkout saying, we can't do this. We can't take corporate money. That's the whole point of this thing. And that walkout decided they needed a party that would not take corporate donation. And for a while, they tried to get Bernie Sanders to lead it. But they wanted a party that would not take corporate donations, would not take, millions of dollars from individuals. And they, Nick Brana and others created it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a disagreement with a stance here and there or a platform plank here or there. Like, there is no organization in the world where you agree with every single second that happens. So, but if you have a disagreement, go and work on it and try and fix it and make it better. But Movement for a People's Party is one of the solutions. It is another party outside of the two corporate bought off ridiculous oligarch billionaire Wall Street bullshit parties. And there are others, but they've been around for a while fighting, like Green Party. And Movement for a People's Party is new and has a lot of energy behind it. I think people should check it out. But there's other things that are fighting for something outside of this mainstream garbage. And another good example is these social media platforms have now decided to work with the war machine, the Pentagon, the U.S. government, and crack down on voices like yours and mine. And so Panquake is creating a social media platform that would be outside of all that censorship and not steal your data. And let's hope that continues. There are others out there that are more open source and don't steal your data than Facebook. But I think the thing is, you've got to continue to use these tools, even if they're heavily suppressed, but continue to use the tools that are out there, like Facebook and Twitter. I'm not saying abandon them all, because then you're just standing in the woods yelling at yelling at a confused squirrel. But so use the tools that are out there, but we need to build the alternatives at the same time. We need to build up the alternatives to this capitalist shit show that's destroying our environment, killed 50% of all wildlife over the past 40 years. Insects are down by 25%. Birds are down by 25%. We have to create alternatives immediately, and we should look at every tool we have to do that.
Definitely. Direct action, Gandhi and Dr. King approach. We just had on Bill Ottman from Minds last week or week before.
Oh, yeah, Minds.
Yeah, that's an awesome.
You're on Minds, right?
Yeah, Lee's on. Yeah.
He's going to be out here in Austin March 8th through the 10th to be back on Rogan with Daryl Davis. So I'm going to be getting an interview with him while he's out here. With that being said, man, I know we're running short on time. I want to kind of end on some kind of, you kind of ran through some solutions and stuff like that, but do you think a solution is just getting a better person into office? Like, what would you like to see? What ideally would you like to see in like the next couple years, deeper than just maybe having somebody that you would vote for in office?
I'm about 90% done with electoral politics. However, I will,
I've been abused enough.
I will add this equivocation though, or this caveat. Everyone should vote. You should absolutely vote. You should vote because the local issues, ballot measures, often local officials, state officials are often less rigged by money. I'm not even getting into the fact that, hundreds of thousands of black people are purged from our rolls every year, et cetera. I'm just talking about rigged with money. It's much easier to make change electorally on local and sometimes state levels than it is federally. Federally, as I said, it is just incredibly bought off. Now, again, I think you should vote because they would love the people that run things, that rule things right now, the people that are psychopaths and have no problem with our environment literally collapsing around us. Climate change literally setting the hills on fire. I mean, you can watch video of people in LA driving to brunch with the hills on fire.
But I gotta make brunch.
Yeah, you can watch that shit go down, and we will be the people sitting on the deck chairs on the Titanic sunning themselves. But those psychopaths would love nothing more than for you to not vote, than for everyone to not vote. Because who would end up voting? Well, just a small group of individuals they could buy off, and then that would be that. But beyond that, beyond electoral politics, I think about 5% of your time should be spent talking about electoral politics. And I'm not just talking about shows like yours. I'm talking about large scale, the office discussions around the water cooler, et cetera. 5% talk about electoral politics. The other 95% should be about ways to create change in our community, around us, even online. But it should be more interpersonal change, things like mutual aid, things like activist groups fighting together. People, there are great groups out there, and I don't know them all. I don't claim to be an expert, but, everything from Extinction Rebellion to Direct Action Everywhere. There are groups of people that are getting themselves arrested, sometimes locked up for years, trying to save our planet and our lives. Like, they're doing that for you and for me. And it's amazing. And of course, our mainstream media would never even mention that stuff. Factory farming is like animal agriculture is the second or first greatest cause of climate change. And it basically gets no discussion. And anyway, the point is there are these groups out there, and everyone should be looking into them and trying to work with them and find your thing. I don't claim to know everybody's life and what everybody's passion is, but find your thing you want to become an expert on. Maybe it's community gardening, maybe it's sustainable energy sources, and join the local groups and create change, because there's like no denying we're in a fading empire in late stage capitalism, when you see the environment is unable to continue, because capitalism by definition is the idea of infinite growth on a planet of finite resources. So you can live in a certain portion of it where it seems okay for a while, but eventually the gravity of capitalism is to extract things endlessly until there are no more things to extract. That is the end game. And we need to create alternatives. And when you're in a late stage capitalist system, you see the edges fraying, right? You see more homeless than ever before. You see more homeless and tenuous living situations with 17 million empty living spaces around the United States. That's how many. We have 15 million people that are about to get evicted, like on the edge of eviction, and 17 million empty living spaces that are either owned by people who never use them or just sit empty because the bank wants to wait for, the highest price or whatever. And that's, just one example of how ridiculous the system is. But you see the edges fraying. You see people can't have health care. The number one cause of bankruptcy in this country is failure to pay health care costs or health care debt. And that's even for people that have insurance. Everyone thinks that we're just talking about people that need insurance who have trouble in our country. No, it's people with insurance. Part of the reason so many have died of COVID in our country is because even in other countries where they didn't do shit to deal with COVID, like Sweden, which I've visited a couple times, they have a healthcare system where when people get even a little sick or think they might be sick, they have no problem going to the doctor. They go to the doctor because, well, let's find out what's wrong with me. In the U.S., how many people around this country are like, I am going to the fucking doctor? Before I know it, I'm going to have a bill that it would take me 3 years to pay off. My kid's not going to go to college because I went to the doctor because I had a sneeze. Like, so that's how you end up with a system that is just not serving people, with so many people dying or suffering. It's just unbelievable. And I think we have to, again, build up the alternatives while trying to deal with a fading, collapsing system.
Yeah,
totally true, man. Dude, I like that you brought it back to community. You brought it back to what's local, what's a bit more realistic for people to engage in. I think that's super important. This is really the last thing I want to ask is like moving forward for you, where do you see yourself going? Is there something beyond or different kind of ventures, whether it gets into like, you know, eventually making a documentary one day or moving into some kind of other art form that you're excited about, especially now in the world where content is so much more king. Everyone's staying at home and on their computers a lot more. What do you have in store for the people coming up in the future, and what are you excited about?
Man, I make 2 TV shows every week. I have 3 podcasts. I have a website of Rad Indie Media.
You
where
made a kid.
Put forward, yeah.
I made a kid.
I have a fresh out the box kid. I have a book out called Bullet Points and Punchlines. I'm working on putting the next book out. I'm doing interviews. I do stand-up comedy. I have a stand-up special people can watch on YouTube. Long story short, I'm exhausted, man. I don't need I'm not picking up a ukulele tomorrow. Listen, I'm tired.
I need a nap. Well, here's the website too for everyone to check out. And we'll post it post this in the show description, but just this showing everyone your website. And
dude,
really
you've
appreciate
been prolific, man. It's been beautiful watching you go.
Thanks, man. And the book's at leecampbook.com. It's got a intro and forwards from Chris Hedges and Jimmy Dore, and I think people would enjoy it. It's kind of a mix of comedy and politics. And then the next one will be hopefully coming out within the next few months, and it'll be fairly similar in content, but new ideas. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, I know you got to get back to your kid. You got a full life going on. I heard in there that you have a couple shows. So we'll let you get back to your life, my man. Thank you so much for carving out a period of time for us here. It's been great having you, and I look forward to really diving into some of the interviews that I haven't gotten to so far. I want to watch the rest of that Roger Waters interview as well, man.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And what you guys are doing is wonderful. And I wish you all the best. I hope you keep growing. And for those of your fans who got to you after Hyro Sonic, they should all go give it a listen because it fucking rocks.
Totally. It's up on Spotify. Go give it a listen. The album's called Consciousness, Fame, God, Money, Power. And that only pisses a couple people off. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This is unique. We did it for Lee. We usually do 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays, but as you heard, Lee is a very busy man on Thursdays. So we did it on a Saturday. This is new for us, but with that being said, I love you all. Thank you all for coming and supporting, and I'll catch y'all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.